Well, hello and welcome to the Rugby Ruckus Tight Five. Ben Kimber here. I think I'm wearing the same shirt as you tonight, Morgs. How are you travelling?
No, you've got pink on. I'm not.
I've got a pink one on.
No, I'm not good enough to pull off pink, mate. This is
mate.
Beige. It's one of the few times I'm wearing a shirt at the moment in hotel quarantine, but I thought I'd better do it so it didn't shock people. Interesting week, mate. End of Super Rugby AU final, and I'm in a pretty good mood actually because yesterday was a good day.
Mate, that would have anything to do with not just the Super Rugby final on the weekend, but also your Wicks getting up.
Yeah, the blue-collar battlers, the Wicks had a win against the toffee-nosed boys at varsity there, Sydney Uni. So it was good to kick back and watch it on Channel 7, actually. So it was a nice way to spend the afternoon.
Mate, how much longer are you locked up for, buddy?
A couple of days left, and then I think straight in the salt water to wash it all away, I'd say.
That's what we like, mate. That's what we like. Look, mate, we've got our tight five. We've got 5 things to get through for the day. I'm just going for the show. I'm just going to show you now at home or wherever you are tuning in. We're going to talk about the Super Rugby AU for finishing on a high and what a good season it was. The players of the final, as usual, the players of the weekend, the player of the final. Morgs has got a different Coach's Corner today. Morgs, do you want to just give a little preview of that? What are you going to do in Coach's Corner?
It's pretty much where the grand final was lost, and it's not as simple as analysing the rugby of either side, unfortunately, this weekend. But if you drill down into it, it's a real clear reason why the Reds lost. So
why the Reds lost? And a little bit of some other highlights on the way as we go through. And finally, Morg's test contenders. Now, for those who are on our newsletter, firstly, if you read our newsletter, Morgs' preview of the final was bang on for me. Every week, Morgs will preview the rugby that's coming up. There's a whole bunch of good stuff in our newsletter. Let me just show you what's then. Oh, firstly, Bodies in Motion t-shirt. I forgot the plug for our shop. There's our shop for a Bodies in Motion shirt. But the rugbyruckus.com newsletter, thanks to all of those who signed up. And Morgs, week on week, we're getting more and more people on board with our Rugby Ruckus newsletter. Every single Thursday night, we send it out. This week, we covered His Sands Are Dying. Morgs, you did your Wallabies squad your Wallabies 15 off the squad that Rennie had named. You did your Super Rugby preview as well, which I found was incisive, and we'll talk about that when in your Coach's Corner. And for those who also get the newsletter, you got it first, the rumours of the week, some of the super coaching moves with McKellar staying at the Brumbies, Peter Hewitt leaving, and a few other whispers that we put in there each week. Morgs, the newsletter's going well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I actually spent a bit more time on it this week. We've got so many subscribers, I couldn't just throw it together willy-nilly, so I spent some time on it, and it was good to see that it evolved exactly how we expected. The Reds actually got closer than I expected on the scoreboard with the Brumbies, but the manner of the Brumbies victory was exactly as we talked about. And unfortunately for the Reds, their Achilles heels, the 1 or 2 that they have, did come to the fore.
Yeah, so Morgs broke the whole game down, and it's always interesting to see what he sees or what he thinks is going to happen in a game. So make sure you sign up to our newsletter. Those names that are scrolling at the bottom of our screen, they're our super supporters. There's 2 different levels of support with our newsletter. There's your basic one. It's only $1 a week to get our newsletter. The guys down below have chipped up more than that. They pay about $3 or $4 a week, and we really appreciate all of their support. Morgs, let's just go quickly from an overarching view. Super Rugby AU had a grand final. The Brumbies won it. There was elation down there in Canberra. Only 6,000 fans was the limit, but they all seemed to have a good time. What a great effort to not just get some footy on the park, but to deliver a season, I think, that really showed some great young rugby players in Australia, some really tight games and some different sort of styles within rugby in Australia, culminating in a game like that. It's been a good season, hasn't it, Morgs?
Oh, it certainly has. Think back a few months, we didn't know what rugby we were going to get. We're pretty excited now to get a rugby championship. But on the back of that, Super Rugby AU has been a success in every way, shape or form you could measure it, the way we've had to run it. The fact that they've actually got the competition done. When it first started, there was some pessimism around whether the competition would be finished. At any moment, it looked like the comp would be cancelled. Teams like the Rebels and the Force committing to being away from home. Officials, administrators putting themselves away from their families into stringent situations so we can have games. And I think looking back, this could be a part of the year, Super Rugby Championship for just Australia, that helps Australian rugby as it moves along. It can't be the be-all and end-all, but it can certainly be an important cog, at least in the short term. And for a couple of clubs, I think it was the best thing that could have happened to them. The Reds, as we saw on the weekend, definitely. I think the Waratahs as well, it helped their advancement for the years to come.
Mate, I think you're dead right. And, Super Rugby Aotearoa definitely looked a standard above, and the Wallabies All Blacks is going to be tough. We can see that coming up. But you're dead right. The chance for the Wallabies team, the Australian teams to play each other, to get things moving, to give their young blokes a go, and to see some of these guys step up and to lift a trophy too. I think it was at 2003, 2004, the Brumbies saying 16 years since they lifted a trophy. It means a lot. And a lot of the conversation too around the way that rugby gets structured in Australia and the reason that so many people have pushed in the past for domestic competitions is because you're guaranteed a winner. You're guaranteed a feel-good story. Now, when you play in Super Rugby and you play against some great New Zealand and South Africa teams, even if you're firing, you might win 1 in 3, 1 in 4, so you don't get that culmination and that victory lap at the end of the year where you can see there's something that is tangible that Australian rugby has achieved. It does make a difference, doesn't it, mate?
Yeah, it does. We're in that strange situation, rugby in Australia, where we measure ourselves against other domestic competitions. We measure ourselves against the NRL, the AFL, and to a lesser degree, the A-League. We also measure ourselves internationally in terms of our national team across the whole world and our hemisphere. And also we measure ourselves against other provincial competitions. So we're actually quite hard in benchmarking how we're going. NRL, AFL, no matter what supporter base you have, a small part of your supporter base is happy every year because they win the comp. As we've seen in the 2000s, we've had the Brumbies in 01, the Brumbies in 04, the Reds in 11, and the Tars in 14, and that's it in 20 years. And that's the way it is with this cross-country Super Rugby format. It's been great to see, say, a Reds team, it's really expedited their development. They've played 2 high-pressure, sudden death games. But there's no way they would have been playing those sorts of games if normal Super Rugby will come across. The caveat, obviously, is, as you mentioned, Benny, how well does it prepare us to play a rugby championship?
Mate, absolutely. And that's not far away. So let's get into the game. But before I do, guys, just remember, if you post a comment on Facebook while the show is on, we'll try and include it in the show. If you've got a question or a thought, throw it up there. Even tag a mate. You can tag a mate who you think might enjoy the show down below in the comments section and try and help us get this show out there a little bit more. Morgs, let's get into the game. We thought that it might be the Brumbies might get away. It looked like they should, but the Reds just kept scrapping. Let's talk about some of the players that stood out and we'll get into what happened within the game. Mate, with 5 players. What are you doing to me, Morgs? We started out with 3 players in each game. You went up to 4 last week. Now you got 5, mate. You just couldn't stop yourself this week. Who have you got, bud?
Yeah, there were a couple that I left out as well. I wanted to put there. This was a game where there really weren't huge standouts. Lolosio, in the context of him coming in, he was impressive. The combination with Powell, had to throw Powell in because he's a bit short of a gallop as well. We talk about Lolosio coming in from injury. Powell hasn't been the preferred option at the Brumbies whatsoever. He played excellently well, controlled things at the base of the ruck, really helped by some great... I think the difference in breakdown work between the Brumbies and the Reds was quite clear and a crucial part of the game. Big tip of the hat there to Laurie Fisher for the work he does at the breakdown at the Brumbies. Taniela Tupou, dangerous with the ball. I think some of the way the scrum was refereed, they couldn't exert dominance. The Reds, our newsletter subscribers will know that we said it was the Brumbies line out, the pressure they could put on the Reds line out and their own line out versus what the Reds could get out of their scrum. And we saw a huge impact from the Brumbies line-out throughout the game. Thought McCaffrey, underrated back rower. He ran some of the really hard, tough lines, second phase around the corner into a quite dense Reds defence. Thought Harry Wilson did pretty much similar for the other side of the coin. Great support line for the try with Patea. Couple of good carries. Lots, really, really busy night. Fraser McWright, I thought, had an excellent game. Just some of his decision-making at the breakdown, I think, let him down, and I couldn't reward him by putting him in our nominees. I know how desperate players are to be one of our nominees for players of the round. I couldn't reward him just because he and Miller both probably struggled with some of the decision-making at the breakdown.
Mate, of those 5 players, the really important thing is, and you previewed it in the newsletter, but the fact that it was Powell, Lolosio and McCaffrey there, 3 calls that McKellar made, and we've got them out as players who shone. Because Powell, for me, and those who listen to us regularly, I've been critical of him before, not critical, but just said I don't see him as a test player. I'd seen him as a solid super player, but I didn't know if he had enough to step up. He was given a chance here in the final, in a pressure game, played an excellent game of footy. Lolosio coming in relatively cold as well, for a young number 10. to get the Man of the Match award as well. I think Fox gave him the Man of the Match award. Excellent. And McCaffrey, again, 3 calls there. I think Kurandrani, too, also stepped up. A couple of Kurandrani runs in particular led to a try. So the guys that had to put in a game and show that maybe some of the thinking around them wasn't there. And McKellar showed that faith in them too. They had a lot of footy up there. McCaffrey stayed out, I think, 80 minutes in the end. Valentini came on and replaced someone else. So it was McKellar's calls that end up paying off. True, Morgs?
Oh, definitely. He's got the trophy probably lying in his bed next to him right now. Dan McKellar, if he's pulled head coach's rank. But, he got that right. The 9 and 10 he got right. Kurandrani was a big selection too, and he repaid the face. He came back and ran some hard lines against weak shoulders at times they needed it, especially when they're trying to reanimate their attacking play in the top half of the field. Brumbies got their selection right. They had the 2 weeks' time to prepare it. They are, if you want to sort of summarise the game in terms of the footy, the Brumbies, as we've mentioned all the way along, are a couple of years ahead in the development of their program, in how settled their list and team selection is to the Reds. This could have been, for me, my inkling is it's a changing of the guard moment. I see the Reds as firm favourites next year. I see the Reds as the team on the up. The Reds might, have the edge over the Brumbies, I think, going forward.
Well, let's just have a quick look at a couple of highlights out of the game. This one here was the Banks try. So Muirhead takes a quick tap. Reds get a penalty against the ruck. Muirhead quick tap makes it almost to the line. He sets it nicely. Powell straight on top. They spin wide here. I think Fainga takes it up. They're only a metre or two out, but the width is there. The Reds have been pushed backwards, and all of a sudden Simone shapes to throw wide, but short ball to Banks, and Banks shrugs a couple off and goes over. Banks, do you think he's coming good? Muirhead, I think, had a good game. Muirhead, he scored one, ducking from the base of the, pop of a Lolesio pass, and there he almost got through off a quick tap. Muirhead had a big game, but what do you think about Banks as well, Morgs?
Yeah, he's warming to it, getting better with every run. He was quite a short at the back, made some decisions to run or kick throughout the middle part of that second half when it was crucial that the Brumbies keep the ball up the Reds' end and protect that lead. He's getting better and better. He'll go into Wallabies camp. He'll have more time in there. I think he'll continue to improve. Muirhead, funny enough, that whole passage of play was very un-Brumbies-like. What do you expect when the Brumbies get a line out next to the sideline, 10 metres out from your line? You're thinking maul and try. Quick tap. They don't go pick and go to the line as well. They go to expanses straight away. And Banks one-on-one, that's probably the most space there was in the whole game. Think about those people who've watched the game. Think about the times you just see guys like Banks, Lolesio, Kurandrani. It's always running into traffic. The Reds covered the space of the field really well. That was one of the few times they couldn't get their spacing right and get that Reds wall in front of the Brumbies. And the Brumbies in that period in the second half just upped the tempo on the Reds. I was interested to hear that Rod Cafe alluded to the fact that the Reds might have had a big training week, which I thought really interesting. Benny, you and I discussed previously, and also we put in our newsletter about the emotional high and having to rebound back up off that, recover, bring yourself back to earth, and then get back up for another big game. We talked about the emotional high of guys making Wallaby squads as well. Interesting that it sounds like the Reds had a big training week as well. What I will say is they did in the last few minutes come hard at the Brumbies as well, but they had that lull in the 50 to 65 minute mark. That lull was when the Brumbies really broke that elastic to a certain degree.
Yeah, mate, you talk about the way the game played out. I mean, the Reds beat the Brumbies, reasonably comfortably in the final round of the game. In this one, they just couldn't seem to get their attack to break the Brumbies' defence down. The one time they did, it was a moment of brilliance from Patea. Let's have a quick look at that. He is an absolute gun, isn't he? He's one of the most gifted players we've got. Here, the ball goes backwards to nothing. Powell's chasing through. Patea jumps off both feet, darts through. He grabs an injury. This is where he got injured and came off the field. Out of the back of the hand as he was slowing down. I think he would have gone himself if he hadn't grabbed at his hip there. But Wilson, watch how smart Wilson is here. Wilson goes to ground there, and he pops up, and he's just hanging behind the Brumbies line. And as he sees Patea comes through, he starts to go. And he knows Patea's going to overtake him, runs a beautiful pace, so he's behind. The pass goes backwards. In goes Wilson, and I think Patea's down holding his hip. What did you think of that, mate? Is that just Patea brilliance?
Oh, it is. That's a field full of 46 quality players at one time or another. The other night, it's only the real X factor point of different players that can create something from nothing. And of the players on the field, you'd probably say Tupou and Patea are the only true X factor players on that field. They're all amazing players, but that's one of the few players on the weekend that could really make a difference to his team. And he created that from nothing. He definitely pings the left hip flexor, it looks like, grabs it beforehand, still has the presence of mind to flick the ball right to Wilson. And that was somewhat against the run of play, especially, the first 6 or 7 minutes, the Reds hadn't touched the ball. The Brumbies hadn't made a tackle. And that was a really important bounce back straight away. You said that the Reds struggled with their attack. I actually found that they just didn't give themselves opportunities, and we'll talk about that a bit more in Coach's Corner.
Mate, you said you think he pinged his hip flexor. What's that as an injury? Is that something we should be worried about? Do you think we're going to hear that he's struggling to make the test side?
No, I'd say that he just pulled him up short. So he would have had a little grab in the hip flexor from where he grabs a hold of himself. It looks like he just pinged that hip flexor. That's just a rest and recovery injury. He sort of carries on a little bit longer afterwards to try and get through it. So that's a good sign. I think that's probably less worrying than say what Tamua did in the semi-final. You ping something high in the groin or something like that. That's a little bit worse in terms of change of direction than a hip flexor, which should recover pretty well.
Yeah. Well, mate, Jordan Patea, we do want to see him fit and firing and probably in that 13 jersey for the Wallabies, but we'll talk about your test lineup towards the finish. I'll just show one more clip from there because I score a try in it. Or so everyone tells me I look like Angus Blythe. Here, O'Connor tries to go back through and Tate McDermott finally finds a bit of space. He's found it all year, but he hasn't here. Throws the dummy, goes back inside, wrong foot Miller and Alalatoa. Almost makes it to the line. The ball hits the deck. A little bit interesting as to whether the ball went forward there, but a lucky kick forward. Blythe dives on it with that shocking haircut of his with Queensland Reds in his hair. But the ball here just sort of jiggles out of Tate McDermott's hands, goes forward into the in goal, and Blythe dives on it. The try is given, and right there and then, it was game on. I did not expect the Reds to be that close or to be right in it, and it came down to one score. Morgs, is it about the attitude they've had? Like, we'll talk about what they did wrong and why they might have lost the game, but they've had the right attitude with Thorn, haven't they?
Yeah, I think they just look like they're excited to play. You look at the line break from Patea, how many blokes are chasing hard. Wilson works hard to get in an offload position. Jock Campbell's right in behind him in offload. You see there, everyone chasing the same channel. Wright was chasing McDermott. Blythe was chasing McDermott. They just look like young kids excited to play footy. They were riding the wave. They'd won 4 games in a row. Maybe they're not smart enough to know they were supposed to lose. Maybe they weren't smart enough to know it, 28-13 or whatever it got to, 25-13, that the elastic had been broken and they should probably just let the Brumbies cruise to victory. They just kept throwing shots at the Reds. They did it headless. They did it dumb almost, but they kept throwing shots. And this team will just continue to improve and accelerate in their performance.
Mate, we've had that great chat with Ben Darwin before, who talks about cohesion, talks about players spending time together. That's certainly what Thorn has talked about. Interesting to see this week too, or not this week, yesterday or today, he was asked after the game about his future because I don't think he's on contract next year. He said that's a question for another time. So, at this stage, you've got to say you hope he stays around. They seem to be on a good wicket and a good approach. Look, I don't think, I'm lauding him as one of the greatest coaches of all time yet. He's still, going to deliver over time. But where he's got this young Reds team too, where McKellar has the Brumbies, both in good spots, Morks.
Well, it's another reason why Super Rugby AU is probably a good thing. They could easily have had a nightmare back end of the Super Rugby season, and there'd be wolves at the door to Brad Thorne's coaching office. Here, they've made the finals as they should. They've seen off a Rebels team, probably more experience. They've seen off a Rebels team. Then they've really pushed the Brumbies, and suddenly it's not far off as positive as you can be about a final loss in the Reds. You think, well, geez, give us another year and we'll be back bigger and better. They're on the rise. Think about what a low teens position in Super Rugby on the ladder would have been like for the Reds. Remembering, we were talking about it once again in the newsletter. Last time the Reds won away from home was against the Sunwolves away from home in March of 2019. They were able to park up in Brisbane for large parts of the competition, not travel, host a semi, fly down day over in a final and come up short. Some of these things have really changed the lines of thinking of supporters, administrators, and the rugby public in Australia around what the Queensland Reds are all about.
Absolutely, mate. And in the end, this was the call. Noah Lolosio came in cold after his hammy that he was out with for a few weeks. Picked in the Wallabies squad a little bit on spec because he hadn't been playing, though he had shown earlier in the year that he was going well. Wells, what did you make of Noah Lolosio's game in this final?
Oh, in the context of the game, the situation, the selection situation, the position he plays, the responsibility he had. As I said, no one really individually stood out for the full 80 minutes. but the 10 who controlled the game for the Brumbies on the back of an excellently performing forward pack and a line-out that functioned well for them. He drove them around the park, made sure they played the game in the right areas of the field. Whenever they had opportunities, they took points. I thought it was about as complete a display as you could ask for from a young 10 in a situation like that.
And, mate, do you think that the fact that Powell and Lolosio came in together and that combination, do you think that will influence the Wallaby selectors at all?
I think it will make it more of a conversation. I think Powell before the weekend, everyone just thought, well, he's the fourth. If they'd have picked the 35-man squad, he wouldn't be there. Now he's the starting 9 in a team that won the comp. He was excellent for the first 3 quarters of the game until White came on. And that combination with Lolosio is another arrow in the quiver. Lolosio, it's interesting. Dan McKellen, I saw quoted after the game saying he's ready. So it's a huge vote of confidence from a head coach who earlier, less than a month ago was saying about locks in form, don't rush them. Just because these guys play a handful of good games, we're talking about them as Wallabies. He's now saying Lolosio's ready. He's a guy that, Dan McKellar, now Super Rugby AU winning coach. There was talked about him being in the Wallaby squad at one stage as a coach. So his opinion will have weight within that Wallabies environment. If we err on the side of caution, then you're looking at an O'Connor, Tamua 10-12. Lolosio is probably the only one that could force his way into that conversation at the moment.
Mate, we will talk about the test team after we go through your coach's corner, but I just want to say, guys, we're having technical issues. The comments aren't coming through. So I've just pulled up the Facebook live stream on my phone over here to see what you guys are saying. Logan Tyndall said Noah's the best 10 in Australia. Well, I think he's certainly in guiding the Brumbies to the final there. That's the thing. Jay Annabelle said he's going to be a superstar, this dude. Steve Lenthal asked, did Angus Blythe's haircut help him with his try? I don't know about that, mate. I think he probably, once he got it cut, he's now going to forget about it, but it certainly was a different. Morgs, have you seen anyone do anything like that? Cut their hair specifically for a big game?
I've seen the players dye their hair the colour of the team's jersey sometimes for club finals. That's pretty big. And I'm surprised Brad Thorne didn't make him shave the whole head off. It's interesting from Thorne. We think of Thorne as the cranky old school guy, making sure they had black polished boots and stuff like that. But I can imagine when he walked in, I know Link would have made him cut it off. Link would have made him shave his head.
Yeah, really?
Oh, and Eddie, you wouldn't have done it.
Oh, Eddie for sure.
You just wouldn't have done it.
Mate, Nick Burnham made a good point on there. Line-outs let the Reds down, and that was one of the big differences. We probably didn't hammer that enough. But, when you go into a big game like this, everyone says it's your Achilles heel, the first 2 line-outs go astray, the pressure goes on, doesn't it? When part of your game starts to break down, and the Reds, they would have known, they would have practiced all week, they would have known they've got to get their line-outs right if they're going to be, play the kind of territory game they need to or make the most of their possession. I've seen some good stats from some of the stats guys out there showing how many of points come off lineouts in our game in Super AU as opposed to scrums. It would have been very disappointing for them. And Brandon Payangaramosa, not great arrows in his quiver for a Wallaby selection, I would think.
Yeah, well, if you look, I looked individually at the lineouts today. I can't see any of them that were really the throwers' fault, truthfully. I think the defensive lineout for the Brumbies, and we've talked about how good the defensive lineouts have been for all teams, the Rebels and the Brumbies especially. But I think the Reds got done tactically at lineout time, in movement, in areas, in everything. I don't think I remember one where it was when I put down thrower. I think either the Brumbies got up in front of them under pressure, Reds went back to trying to hit the front. That just made it easier for the Brumbies to leave the back of the line out, leave that space at the back of the line out and say to them, if you're brave enough, Reds, throw it to the 15-metre line. And they just defended really hard the first sort of 6 metres of that 5 to 15-metre space, got up and got busy in his vision as well. So I think tactically the Brumbies just had to, and we talked about it. It was going to be the issue. And the flip side of that was the Reds couldn't put enough pressure on the Brumbies lineup. They got one steal early and gave the ball back straight away. We'll talk about it in Coach's Corner, but lineout was absolutely crucial for the Reds.
Mate, let's get to Coach's Corner now, but before we do, Andrew Swain, who did a great job hosting the post-match awards after the game there, said apparently Thorny loved it. Andrew Blythe's hair he's talking about. Blythe had the single black strip of tape too, homage to his coach. So Thorny loved it, mate. There you go.
Well, he must be mellowing in his old age. I think he's becoming, a bit one of the modern coaches.
Now, mate, let's move into Coach's Corner. For those people who are new to the show, and I can see the numbers are great again this week with plenty of people in here watching with us. Apologies that we can't get your comments up tonight, but we'll fix that for next week. Morgs, every week in Coach's Corner, you like to pull out something which shows us a little bit or teaches those of us who aren't coaches a little bit of what went on in a game. Something different today. What's the headline of Coach's Corner while I get the clip up, bud?
It's where the final was lost for the Reds. It's really that simple. And it's not their rugby. It's not their attack. It wasn't their defence. It was the way they managed the game, and just the gift way they let the Brumbies get out of their own zone. What did we talk? So people who are subscribers to newsletters before you press play, Benny, they knew that we talked about the Brumbies. It's all about territory. Brumbies love nothing more than piggyback penalties out of their own zone, go to their line out, go for another penalty. Suddenly, in a minute, you're 5 minutes out from your own line under pressure, and the Brumbies are brilliant at converting territory in your 22 into points on the scoreboard. This example, funnily enough, is just after Dalgunu's put in the bin. So people will remember, I think it was 25-13 at the time. The Brumbies had just scored. Reds kick off. Kick long. Great tactical choice to kick long. Dalgunu picks up.
Should I play this, should I, buddy?
No, this is the next one after. So I'll do the long lead in, unfortunately, guys.
That's all right,
listen to me, sorry. So Dalgunu just lifts, poor discipline, lifts McCaffrey on the shoulder, yellow card. From that, penalty. From their own 22, Brumbies get a penalty. They kick it out around halfway. What are the Brumbies going to do? Maul. The Brumbies lose the ball from the first phase play they try to do, but it's penalty advantage. Then they kick it down into the corner, and from there they get the 3 points as well, and they go to 28-13. The Reds should have done exactly what they do here. And let's look at the result if you are disciplined and smart in the way you kick off. Have you pressed play, Benny?
So, Morgs, what you're showing us here is this is the Reds doing it right, which they didn't do enough of in the game, yes?
Yeah, they didn't do it at the kick-off to the game at 0 minutes. They didn't do it at the second kick-off. This is the only one they did well on the weekend. Let him hit the ground, just make the tackle, good line, put pressure on that ruck there. White doesn't want to give you a box kick, so he changes it up and goes to Lolosio deep, who shifts. And then this is the pressure situation for the Brumbies. Look, you get a free shot at a breakdown here. The Brumbies do as well as they can. You get a free shot at the breakdown. Right, a dead ball, slow ball. McDermott gets itchy feet, pressure on Lolosio, and he shanks one down the middle of the park. And look where the ball's caught, on the 40. Hegarty gets it in the middle of the field and runs it into the Brumbies 40. That is, if you pause it there, Benny, that's all we need to see. You've kicked the ball off. You've just had points conceded. You kick the ball off. After 45 seconds, you are in possession in the middle of the field, less than 40 metres out from your opposition's line. That is a successful kickoff. Now, people who have watched the game, if you go back and watch the game, the kickoff at the start of the game, penalty. The next kickoff at the start of the game, penalty. The one before that I alluded to, points. Every time, they just piggyback the Brumbies out of their half. And once you give the Brumbies territory, you couldn't be in it. And the previous one that we talked about with the 3 points, the score was 25-13. The Brumbies get it to 28-13. From that possession there, the Reds score points, and they slowly get back into the game. And the huge moment at the back end of the game was also when the Reds got a penalty when they were 5 points behind, and they thought about taking the 3. If they'd have managed their kickoffs, worst case scenario, they're only behind by 2 there, they had a penalty kick to lead the game. The Reds' ill discipline in their tackle height targeting and also the way they manage their kickoffs and giving away silly penalties like tackling guys in the air cost them the final. Their rugby was good enough. If they had more territory and opportunities like the one we just showed them, they beat the Brumbies. And that would have been a surprise victory. And they impressed me with their rugby. But the youth cost them. The attitude
is it inexperience? Is that what it is? Inexperience?
Well, it's either poor messaging going into the game. They looked like they were amped and they were aggressive. They just got it wrong. You've got to be controlled. You know, we talk about the blue or the red head and things like that. You've got to have controlled aggression. They targeted too high. They tried to be too physical, and it came with ill-disciplined. I think Griggs mentioned that he thought they were quite a disciplined side. They are an ill-disciplined side, the Reds. And they've got away with it on the back of their aggression, and their rugby has been great. But their rugby didn't count on the weekend. Their ill-discipline and their inability to manage keeping the Brumbies in their own zone, making the Brumbies work out of their own zone, cost them this final. And the Brumbies, they loved it. It was perfect.
Yeah.
And they're such
played right into their hands, didn't it?
Oh, they were laughing. They said, how good's this? We get 3 piggybacks out of our zone. You give the Brumbies territory. They do what they've practiced. They spend their whole life on the training field practicing plays off lineouts, and they kill them.
Yeah, and you put it in that context, mate. It's quite stark that Reds got so close, and they gave a team that is as comfortable and is as structured and is as well put together as the Brumbies. They gave them all of that rope and still managed to be within punching distance. And I think one of the things you said that resonated with me was, the Reds, if they had just been a little bit more disciplined towards that last, few minutes of the game, if they're they could have been within a penalty goal instead of needing a try, and everything changes, doesn't it? You get down in that part of the field and you only need 3 points to win it. Very, very different scenario, and they weren't too far off it.
Yeah, the ill discipline led to scoreboard pressure on themselves, and that meant they were just too far. They couldn't make that run. They were that close in spite of themselves, the Reds. That's why I think that they're a team on the up. They come back next year in the same situation. Like, they're a decent chance of being the best team in Australia next year right the way through. And I think they're probably, with all the respect possible to the Brumbies, they looked in control. They did what they needed to do. But, gee, they gave them a hell of a fright this year. Imagine them with a settled group of young players who've spent a lot of time in the Wallabies environment, come back next year, more mature, better knowledge of their game, more aware of what works, having played 2 high-pressure games. Imagine them next year. The Reds are favourites next year for the competition.
Mate, let's get the early bets on, guys. I'll apologise again that I can't throw the comments up on screen. They aren't coming through, but I am checking them on my phone. If you've got any questions, please throw them up there. Mark Andrews made a comment that he thought the Reds, when we talk about the Reds being ill-disciplined there, he thought it sounds like the Checker Wallabies. Morgs, I don't know if you agree with that, but that's certainly not what Thorn wants to hear, I'm sure, because the Wallabies didn't get that kind of success under Checker that Thorn wants for the Reds. Let's talk about the test side, Morgs. After all of that, there's a few guys in there that made me think differently about whether they are the right guys for the test squad or not. But before we do that, before you hear my opinion, let's get into yours. Because for the newsletter subscribers, they got this last week. So when the Wallabies squad was named, when Rennie came out with his first Wallabies squad, we talked about it last week. I still am stunned that Naisarani didn't make it. But Morgs, you named your 23 from the guys that Rennie had picked, and here's what you picked. Looking at who you've got there, Morgs, and for those who are listening, he went Sio Fainga Tupou, Philip Salakai Loto, Valetini Hupasamu, McDermott O'Connor, Korobidi Tamua Patea, Dungunu, Haylett Petty in his starting lineup. Morgs, did anything happen in the super final that made you think differently, that if you were picking the Wallabies to play the All Blacks this weekend from the players that Rennie has chosen, would this still be your lineup?
Yeah, I picked the same team. There'd be some injury queries over a few of them. We'd have to get them through the medical on Monday before we start preparing. But that's still the team. A lot of people confirmed what I thought about them. The people that are closer to selection than they were are those ones that we've mentioned. Powell, he might have jumped to Jake Gordon. He might be sniffing around an opportunity in one of the other games, not the 2 Bledisloes to begin with now. I thought that obviously Lolosio, the obvious one, he's closer to O'Connor. Do we let O'Connor play the first 2 Bledisloes, and then do we let Lolosio play one or maybe the first or second game back in Australia in the Rugby Championship? The first 3 games that the Wallabies play are going to be against the All Blacks. They'll play 2 in New Zealand, and I think on November 7 they'll host the All Blacks at Suncorp Stadium. 3 straight Bledisloe tests. That's a tough way to start your test career. There's the old saying of, if you're good enough, you're old enough. But, we'll have to probably see how the first 2 Bledisloes go and make a decision there. But Lolosio will play in gold within the first 4 or 5 games of the Wallaby test season, including in a starting position. But they're probably the big ones. McWright is the other one that some of the way he played on the weekend, while I didn't like some of the decision-making he made at the breakdown, he played physical and tough, and he was everywhere. So he's closer to Hooper now than he was for me a week ago. Everyone else confirmed my thoughts on where they'd be. You weren't very kind to me. You wouldn't let me pick anyone from outside the squad. You wouldn't let me have a bit of fun with locks or back rows or anything. So I tried to stick within the lines for a change. But I'd be comfortable to see that team, that 23, run out against the All Blacks on October 11, I think it is.
Now, I'll tell you something that we're going to do for our newsletter subscribers first. Others will see it later. But when they do actually name a Wallaby side, we're going to work with Benny Darwin and look at cohesion of the side. We're going to end up saying, what do they look like? That will be exclusively for our newsletter subscribers first and foremost. But we will show the rest of you probably after the game. But the newsletter subscribers will get that first. Well, there's a couple of players I want to talk about particularly in here in this test context. The first one for me was Dungunu. Now, Dungunu didn't have the greatest game in the final. The previous week, unbelievable, had a fantastic game. Here, dropped a couple of balls, couple of errors, didn't quite have the game that he had. The thing that I'm concerned about, if I could put it this way, as I've said to you before, could you play Korobidi and Dungunu on the same side? The thing that concerns me is look at the way the All Blacks play. Now, Dave Rennie has to name a test side that can play the All Blacks. Now, that might be different to picking the best blokes to be on the park. There are certain things you're going to need to lock down and button down to make sure you get absolutely right. Now, the line-out being one, but I'm not talking about that with Dungunu. But I'm talking about the fact that the All Blacks are a team that kick more than any other. Like they are a real kicking side. People love the way they play and they are entertaining. But my God, they kick. They kick a lot and they kick with purpose. And they kick to make it contested. Contested kicks is a massive part of what they do. You put a rookie winger in there like a Dungunu, they are going to go for him. They are going to be box kicking and they are going to have George Bridge or Ioane or one of these guys hammering down to take him out every single time. What I'm going to be fascinated by is Dave Rennie going to tighten up a little bit there? Is he going to stick a Dane Haylett-Petty on the wing? You know, someone he knows is going to catch the ball, someone he knows is going to be safe, or is he going to roll the dice? What do you think of that? Do you think it's am I right in saying that's what the All Blacks do?
Yeah, it is. But yes, that's the way they'll play the game. The issue is they're all rookie wingers. Muirhead, Wright, Daugunu, all rookie wingers. Banks, not a winger. Really struggled defensively in the back three when he played in South Africa. Haylett-Petty, Hodge, Maddox, not wingers. Go back to some of the times that Haylett-Petty played on the wing. Really struggled to be a finisher. Excellent at being the first man. Great under the high ball. He's a fullback. He is not a winger. So what you can do is maybe you save a try by catching a high ball, but you don't score the two that the inside backs and your shape creates. So a winger's got to be a winger. The winger, if we give a winger a sniff, he's got to be able to finish. Now, Daugunu, Korobidi, they are clearly better at their winger role, the finishing role, than the other options. And the guys who can play second fullback, I suppose, I think they give up too much at the moment. If you want to play, if you're thinking, if you're going over there saying, well, we're going to get beat by 20, but I only want to get beat by 10, well, maybe you do that. But that's not the way I dare say Dave Rennie will be approaching it.
Mate, a quick comment from the crowd, and again, apologies, we can't put them up, guys, but Jay Annabelle has a crack at you. After the way the Brumbies played last night and all season, not a single ACT back in your starting 15, really?
Yep, really. So they won last night. They won last night on the back of their forward pack, their line out, their set piece, and the way they occupy the territory. Banks, if Banks had a full season, I'd have picked him. But he hasn't. He could be the one. If you don't want to play Daugunu, you put Korobidi back to his preferred left wing, and then Banks maybe on the rhythm of a few more weeks training, he's tracking the right way. Maybe you pick him on the right wing. He did struggle defensively with some of that stuff at test level. Then who else? Simone. There's a few on the bench that I put in there.
You had White and Simone on the bench. You had White, Simone, and Banks. You had three.
Yeah, White couldn't make the starting lineup for the Brumbies. You want to be picked in the starting lineup for the Wallabies. I thought O'Connor was impressive. Tamua picks himself. You don't want to put Patea in. Korobidi picks himself. Harsh, but pretty fair, I thought.
Mate, up the front, the lineup is going to be critical. You've gone for Fainga, Matt Phillip, Lukan Salakai-Loto. You've got Valentini on the side, Hooper and Samu. You're comfortable that there's enough talent there to be picking the ball out of the air regularly off the Fainga throws?
We've got the great Jeff Parling, so hopefully the magic man can do his bit. Phillip, quick enough across the ground and gets up quickly. Salakai-Loto, okay. And Valentini can be lifted and Samu can be lifted. So you've actually got movable options there. You can have someone really easy to lift back at the tail, or you can have someone to get up really quickly at the front of the line out, some of those shorter back rowers. The other thing is it's sort of give and take. There wasn't a line-out option I thought was going to be good enough elsewhere to put in the team. Hannigan would be the easiest guy to throw up in the air at 6. Chuck him at 6, throw him up in the air, doesn't lose. But you lose some of the stuff that these other guys I've picked do around the park. Rob Simmons, probably our best line-out caller. But I think some of these other guys' performances mean they should be put in there as well. I think we've seen Lukan Salakai-Loto, not a 6 at test level at the moment. Let's give him a crack at lock. And then when the cavalry comes back, we're fully expecting Rory Arnold, when the Reg 9 test window kicks in, to slot straight back in and possibly another lockdown. But in terms of you making me stick between the lines and pick who's in the squad, that's what I've come up with.
That's what we've got for sure, mate. And the other one I find interesting is Valentini. So McCaffrey got the nod from McKellar on the weekend in the final and proved to be a good pick, as we said. Valentini, I tweeted it before the game or during the game. I said, he's such a beast. He's such a strong young man. I want to see him start to go. I feel like he's not getting as involved as he might be, using that body enough, Morgs? Are we not seeing enough for what the potential you think he has?
No, I think he's been good. I think he's been consistently penetrative when he's had the ball. He's been physically dominant in some of his tackling. He's continuing to learn his craft. I'd throw him in there. And then you hit it on the head. We're not picking a best of Super Rugby selection. If I wanted to pick a best of Super Rugby selection, I might stick the Brumbies backline in there or whatever. But we're picking guys we think are suited to test footy. Now, by the end of Rugby Championship, I'm hoping that Lolosio is the Wallaby 10. But right now, let's be patient. Let's bring him back into that fold. He's one game back from injury.
Same with Hosea. You wrote the same about Hosea. You want to see Hosea work his way into that starting lineup. You'd love to see Hosea and Arnold, I suppose, as the combo as the championship rolls in.
Yeah, I suppose the most interesting thing is you pick the test team you think will be there for the last test of the Rugby Championship. See how you think this team will evolve. What I'd hope is Lolosio is there. Hosea's there. I'd love to see someone like an Ire Simone develop in that Wallaby environment and provide probably a little bit more punch than a Matt Tamua, but not as much of a game manager helper for a Lolosio. So there's that balance issue in the midfield there. I'll tell you what I'd love. The other one I'd love, and that we didn't mention off the back of the final, is Hunter Paisami. I think he's a bloke perfectly suited to test rugby.
Yep. No, I agree, mate. And I think you said in the newsletter too that, playing him coming in at 13 and Pate going to the wing was probably their best backline, even though Pate is such a gun and you want to see him in the 13 jersey for Australia. It just meant there was more talent in there, wasn't it?
Yeah, and also Pate gets that roving role. He's playing 13. He's not in that position to scoop up that loose ball off James O'Connor. He can get back and counter-attack. He has that roving role. If you end up with if a Kurandrani gets back into form or something, you end up with a Pate and a Korobidi on the wing, well, then there's a bit of fun too on the edges.
Yeah. And I tell you what we will get you to do, Morgs, in the newsletter for subscribers next Thursday is we'll put aside the Wallaby stuff and we will name the super team of the year. So the guys who, in their position were the best. So not worried about combos or who's going to make the Wallabies, but let's pay some dues to the guys who actually played it. So that'll be in next week's newsletter. Morgs, we're going to take off in a second. There's no questions I can see coming through, but we've still got plenty of people there on the live stream. Morgs, any closing thoughts? Only a couple of weeks now until we see the Wallabies go around. It's time to get excited about the Wallabies. It's time to get excited about what Dave Rennie can do. What do you think we expect for the next couple of weeks, mate? Are they going to go down in their bunker and is Rennie going to keep it quiet, or do you think we'll hear a bit of noise?
Well, they've snuck up to the Hunter Valley. They're all up there now and will be joining tomorrow as well. So they'll prepare there. That's somewhere that the Wallabies have been before. I'm really interested to see the way they play. One thing about last night is we saw some really traditional way the Brumbies play. Be interesting to see if the Wallabies in a short, preparation time don't add too many new layers to this Wallaby team. They play some of the footy that some guys are used to at Super Rugby, or do we start to see some very Scott Wiseman or some very Dave Rennie things? If we see, for example, Scotty Wiseman loves if the backs play really flat and tight in the 10 channel early and go back straight away after that. So backs first phase, back second phase. We don't see that a lot in Australian rugby. A lot of it's in 10 channel, forwards around the corner. Or if we're going to go wide, we go wide and we bounce back off the sideline. Or will we see line out, a false line out where that forward instead of a maul pulls out as Pocock used to do and hit a hard unders line like a Tavita Kurandrani as people are used to be seeing and playing off the back of that? Or will that go straight in the bin and there'll be different plays off line out? This is an intriguing time to be a Wallaby supporter to see how the Wallabies are going to play their footy.
Mate, you're getting me excited actually because I hadn't started to think about it too much, but you're dead right. We've got a whole new combination of guys pulling the strings for the Wallabies. So throw in the bin anything you've seen the last 4 years, whether good or bad or whatever you thought of it. We've got fresh eyes, fresh thinking. If you're the All Blacks, are you right now going through Dave Rennie's teams in Scotland, like what they were doing? Are you looking at Chiefs old stuff? How are you preparing for Dave Rennie's Wallabies, do you think, Morgs?
Well, they probably did it about 3 months ago, truthfully. They've done it. They've looked at, and that one, they know it's someone they know. 2, they'll look at Chiefs. 3, they'll look at what's happened in Scotland. Mate, Eddie Jones, he's probably not playing the Wallabies for another 3 years. He would have looked at it already as well. If you see, for example, a line out or a scrum on the left-hand side and Korobidi or Daugunu truck it up and straight off that we ping one to the 10 who flings it straight to Pateo on an overs line, well, that's different. That's not something we've seen a lot from the Wallabies. That's something that Kiwi teams do. It's something that Scott Wiseman's England have done. It'll be really interesting to see a few more 11, 21 plays bouncing back, 31 players. We're going to talk about that 3 phases the same way, and then try and come back long with reloading backs. It's an exciting time to see, with the talent at their disposal, what this Wallaby staff do and how adventurous and optimistic they can be with it. In this short space of time, they've got a test match to play in 3 weeks? So, how much can you put in that short space of time?
Morgs, loved it as always, mate. Great chat. That was the Rugby Ruckus Tight Five for the week. 2 things before I go. One, if you enjoy the show, please sign up to our newsletter. $1 a week. It just supports us, helps us cover our costs, and you get plenty of good oil from Morgs and plenty of news wraps and opinion from myself in there as well. Second thing is I've also started writing again. I've joined the 15 Rugby Passes new online magazine. So if you're into your deep, great reads on rugby, there's a treasure trove of stuff at the 15.rugby, and I'll be writing plenty of stuff on Australian rugby there and doing some small podcasts for them as well. What are you shaking your head at me for, you Morgs? Doing more rugby.
You're sold out. You're working for the man, are you?
I'm doing everything, mate. We'll be here every week as well.
Are you going to be driving down broadcast dollars soon? What's happening?
Something like that. Morgs, anything before we go?
No, mate, test footy's coming. How good? Can't wait.
All right, we'll be here next week. And make sure you sign up to our podcast as well, because we're doing a few podcasts in between as well. That was the Rugby Ruckus Tight Five. Thanks for joining us. Apologise we couldn't get the comments up, but we'll fix that for next time.